It was 30 years ago today, March 22nd, 1992. A commercial airliner en route to Cleveland crashed, killing 27 on board.
Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the brush, west of runway 29. "45 people survived the accident, but 24 people do not, including Captain Warwood and First Officer Mills.
March 10th, 1989, Dryden, Ontario. Air Ontario Flight 1,363 barrels down the snowy runway, its wings coated with an invisible layer of ice. Moments later, the jet slams into the forest, killing 24 of the 69 people on board.
March 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg.
Less than 3 years later, U.S. Air Flight 405 attempts liftoff from LaGuardia Airport in similar icy conditions. It barely makes it off the ground before plunging into Flushing Bay, leaving 27 dead. 2 crashes, 2 planes carrying innocent passengers, both entirely preventable. The chilling similarity: wing contamination from ice, a hazard that had already been investigated, warnings issued, yet tragically ignored. These disasters forced aviation authorities to confront glaring flaws in de-icing procedures, maintenance policies, and pilot training, leading to sweeping changes in aviation safety. But how did it come to this? Why were warnings from one crash not enough to prevent the next? And what can these stories teach us about the delicate balance of safety and accountability in the skies? March 22nd, 1992. U.S. Air Flight 405 was scheduled to depart from New York's LaGuardia Airport en route to Cleveland, Ohio. The plane, a Fokker F-28, carried 51 people on board, including a mix of business travelers and families eager to reach their destination. Snow blanketed the airport, and temperatures hovered just below freezing. Despite the harsh weather, de-icing procedures were completed, and the flight crew prepared for takeoff. But delays on the ground turned the de-icing fluid into a false sense of security. 35 minutes after the plane was de-iced, it finally taxied to the runway. By then, a new layer of snow had accumulated, creating a thin but deadly coating of ice on the wings. The pilots, unaware of the hazard, initiated takeoff. As the plane roared down the runway and lifted off, it became clear something was wrong. The F-28 struggled to gain altitude, its wings unable to generate enough lift. Just 13 seconds after takeoff, the aircraft violently rolled to the left, crashing into the icy waters of Flushing Bay. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, battling freezing temperatures and icy waters to rescue survivors. Tragically, 27 of the 51 people on board lost their lives.
All told, 27 people, including the captain and 1 flight attendant, died in the crash. 24 survived. Many of those injured in the crash waded through the frigid waters to safe ground as rescuers arrived.
Survivors described the harrowing moments, recalling the jarring impact and the frantic scramble to escape the sinking wreckage. Investigators quickly zeroed in on the cause: ice contamination on the wings. They found that the de-icing fluid used on Flight 405 had long exceeded its holdover time, the duration it remains effective in preventing ice buildup. Compounding the issue, the airport's de-icing operations were limited to terminal gates, forcing pilots to rely solely on visual checks for wing icing during taxi delays. The tragedy raised urgent questions. Why weren't additional de-icing procedures mandatory after extended delays? And why was there no system to ensure pilots could properly inspect their wings for ice contamination? For Canadian investigators, the LaGuardia crash was hauntingly familiar. Just 3 years earlier, the deadly crash of Air Ontario Flight 1363 had highlighted the dangers of wing contamination. Recommendations had been issued to improve de-icing procedures and educate pilots about the risks. Yet little had changed in the U.S. aviation system. As one Canadian investigator put it, "My reaction when I heard about it was, 'My God, it's Dryden all over again.'" March 10, 1989. Air Ontario Flight 1363, a Fokker F-28, made a routine stop at Dryden, Ontario, during its journey from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. With 69 people on board, the flight was already running behind schedule due to earlier delays. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the runway and reducing visibility. Despite these conditions, Captain George Morwood and First Officer Keith Mills prepared for takeoff. The crew had no intention of further delaying their passengers, many of whom were families eager to start their March break vacations.
1363 lands in Dryden. The weather was getting worse by the minute. The plane sat there for half an hour while snow built up on the wings.
But beneath the accumulating snow lay a hidden danger: cold-soaked wings. The fuel inside the aircraft's wings had cooled to sub-zero temperatures, causing snow to freeze on contact and forming an invisible layer of ice. At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 accelerated down runway 29. As the aircraft reached takeoff speed, the pilots pulled back on the controls to lift off. The F-28 barely cleared the treetops at the end of the runway before violently shaking and losing altitude. Survivors later described the horrifying moments as the plane struggled to stay airborne. Flight attendant Sonia Hardwick shouted for passengers to brace for impact. Seconds later, the jet slammed into the dense forest less than a kilometer from the runway. The crash tore the fuselage apart, scattering debris and igniting a fire. The crash site was a scene of devastation. Flames engulfed the wreckage, fueled by the jet's full fuel tanks. In total, 24 lives were lost, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. The remaining 45 survivors fought their way out of the wreckage, many suffering serious injuries from the impact and fire.
Of Flight 1363 on March the 10th, 1989. This day will not only be a day of remembrance for those who perished, but we will also pay tribute to the survivors. We will also not forget the many who helped out that day.
Emergency responders and local residents rushed to the scene, navigating the snowy terrain to rescue passengers. Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers who had been escorting a prisoner on the flight worked tirelessly to save lives, even freeing their handcuffed prisoner so he could escape the wreckage. Investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board, CASB, arrived within 24 hours. They immediately suspected wing contamination as a key factor in the crash. The F-28's black boxes, designed to withstand extreme conditions, had been severely damaged in the post-crash fire, leaving investigators without crucial data. They turned to survivor accounts and physical evidence to piece together the events leading to the tragedy. Witnesses described seeing snow and ice on the wings during takeoff. This matched the investigators' theory. The icy buildup disrupted airflow over the wings, causing a dangerous loss of lift. The crash marked a stark warning about the dangers of cold-soaked wings and insufficient de-icing procedures. The investigation also uncovered troubling details about the airline's operations. Captain Morwood faced significant pressure to stay on schedule despite worsening weather conditions. Air Ontario's policies prohibited de-icing with an engine running, and since the Auxiliary Power Unit, APU, was inoperable, shutting down the engines would have stranded the plane in Dryden indefinitely. Investigators speculated that Morwood believed the snow on the wings would blow off during takeoff. a tragic miscalculation. The combination of operational pressures, poor weather, and inadequate de-icing created a perfect storm for disaster. When investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board, CASB, arrived at the crash site of Flight 1363, they were greeted by a harrowing scene. The broken fuselage scattered across the snowy terrain, the unmistakable smell of jet fuel mixed with the chilling scent of death. Their first task was to document the crash site meticulously, capturing every piece of evidence that could help unravel the mystery of what went wrong. Walking the flight path, investigator David Rower and his team analyzed the wreckage. They observed clipped treetops, confirming that the aircraft had failed to gain sufficient altitude during takeoff. The most pressing question remained: why had the Fokker F-28 struggled to get airborne? With the black boxes severely damaged by an intense fire that burned for over 90 minutes, investigators had to rely heavily on survivor and eyewitness testimonies. Passengers and airport staff reported seeing snow and ice on the wings before takeoff.
It began to snow. It got heavier. Flight 363 was delayed on the ground as another plane struggled to land. The Air Ontario flight finally lifted off just before 12:30. The pilot did not ask for de-icing.
Some described a shiny, icy layer forming as the plane sat on the runway. Flight attendant Sonia Hardwick's chilling account painted a vivid picture of the plane's sluggish ascent and violent crash. Her observations, combined with those of other survivors, helped investigators piece together the sequence of events leading to the tragedy. A key focus of the investigation was the concept of cold-soaked wings, a phenomenon that occurs when sub-zero fuel in the wings cools the surrounding metal. Snow landing on these surfaces freezes instantly, creating a thin, nearly invisible layer of ice. While the leading edges of the F-28's wings were equipped with anti-icing systems, the upper surfaces were left vulnerable. Tests on the wreckage confirmed that the anti-icing system had functioned properly, but it could not clear ice from the critical areas on top of the wings. This contamination disrupted the smooth airflow necessary for lift, explaining the plane's inability to climb. Wing contamination due to ice was not a new discovery in aviation. Studies had long shown that even a small amount of ice could significantly degrade an aircraft's performance. For investigators, this crash was a stark reminder of how deadly this hazard could be. The Dryden crash was proof that without stringent de-icing procedures, cold-soaked wings could easily turn a routine takeoff into a deadly disaster. The investigation into Air Ontario Flight 1363 revealed troubling details about the airline's internal practices. To save costs and maintain schedules, the company frequently deferred maintenance on its aircraft. This policy was at the heart of the Dryden tragedy. One glaring issue was the inoperable Auxiliary Power Unit, APU, which plays a critical role in starting the engines after they are shut down. Without a functioning APU, Captain Morwood faced a tough decision in Dryden. Either keep one engine running during refueling, a risky practice known as hot refueling, or shut down the engines entirely, which would leave the plane stranded. Morwood opted for the first, an inherently dangerous choice, but one allowed by Air Ontario's lax operational guidelines. Air Ontario's focus on keeping flights on time added to the operational risks. Investigators learned that management emphasized punctuality, even at the expense of safety. This pressure trickled down to the flight crews, who often faced tight schedules and were discouraged from taking additional safety measures, like requesting de-icing, if it meant causing further delays. The timeline leading up to the crash painted a clear picture of the intense pressure Morwood was under. Already running an hour behind schedule, further delays could mean missed connections and angry passengers, issues that would likely result in scrutiny from the airline's management. Captain George Morwood was a seasoned pilot, respected by his colleagues for his professionalism and dedication. He was known to prioritize passenger safety, having delayed or canceled flights in the past due to unsafe conditions. Yet, on this fateful day, he made a critical error in judgment. Morwood had briefly considered de-icing in Dryden, but chose not to, believing that the snow and ice on the wings would blow off during takeoff. This assumption would prove catastrophic, but it wasn't made in isolation. The broken APU, the absence of de-icing equipment at the Dryden airport, and the pressure to maintain the schedule all contributed to his decision. Justice Moshansky, who led the public inquiry into the crash, pointed out that the tragedy was not solely the result of pilot error. He emphasized that corporate culture played a significant role. The airline's cost-cutting measures, inadequate training programs, and lack of a robust safety culture created an environment where dangerous shortcuts became normalized. As Moshansky put it, there were a lot of other hands on those throttles pushing forward. The crash of Flight 1363 was not just a failure of one person's judgment. It was a systemic failure of the entire organization. In the aftermath of the Dryden crash, Justice Virgil Moshansky was appointed to lead a public inquiry into the tragedy. His investigation went beyond the immediate cause of the crash, digging deep into systemic issues that plagued Air Ontario and the aviation industry as a whole. The result was the Moshansky Report, a groundbreaking document that outlined 192 recommendations aimed at improving aviation safety. Moshansky highlighted multiple failures: inadequate de-icing procedures, pressure on pilots to prioritize schedules over safety, and poor training on cold weather operations. His findings emphasized the importance of creating a safety-first culture within airlines. One of the most significant revelations from the inquiry was the danger of cold-soaked wings. Moshansky's team worked closely with engineers to understand how even a thin layer of ice could disrupt airflow and cause a catastrophic loss of lift. The report urged airlines to mandate rigorous de-icing protocols and to educate pilots on the risks of cold-soaked wing contamination. The inquiry uncovered another alarming fact. The recommendations from the Dryden crash could have prevented future tragedies, but they weren't implemented widely or communicated effectively. Justice Moshansky had issued an interim report highlighting the urgent need for better de-icing practices. Yet this warning failed to reach key stakeholders in the U.S. aviation industry. This communication breakdown became painfully evident after the LaGuardia crash of U.S. Air Flight 405 in 1992. Investigators found that many of the same issues, wing contamination, insufficient de-icing, and delays, had contributed to both disasters. Moshansky later remarked, "If my recommendations had been followed, the LaGuardia crash could have been avoided." The inquiry also shed light on the limitations of Type 1 de-icing fluid, which was widely used at the time. This fluid was effective at removing ice but had a short holdover time, meaning it could stop working in as little as 6 minutes under heavy snowfall. Moshansky strongly recommended the adoption of Type 2 and Type 4 fluids, which provided much longer protection against ice buildup. Another critical recommendation was the establishment of runway de-icing pads. These facilities would allow planes to receive a final de-icing treatment just before takeoff, ensuring their wings remained clear of ice. At the time of the Dryden crash, de-icing was typically done at the gate, leaving planes vulnerable to ice accumulation during taxi delays. Moshansky's call for de-icing pads would later become a standard practice in many cold-weather airports. The Dryden and LaGuardia crashes served as wake-up calls for the aviation industry. Following the Moshansky report, sweeping changes were implemented to address the gaps in safety protocols, particularly in cold-weather operations. Airports in cold climates began installing runway de-icing pads, allowing aircraft to be de-iced just before takeoff, greatly reducing the risk of wing contamination. Airlines also adopted Type 4 de-icing fluid, which had a significantly longer holdover time compared to Type 1. This thicker, more effective fluid could prevent ice buildup for up to 2 hours, providing a much-needed safety buffer during delays. One of the most critical changes was the improvement in pilot training programs. Airlines introduced mandatory cold weather operations training, ensuring that flight crews fully understood the risks of wing contamination and the proper use of de-icing systems. Pilots were also trained to recognize cold-soaking conditions and to prioritize safety over schedule pressures. Cabin crew training was enhanced as well, with a greater emphasis on emergency procedures during crashes and evacuations. These measures aimed to prepare flight attendants to handle life-threatening situations more effectively, as seen in the heroism of flight attendants during the Dryden and LaGuardia crashes. The lessons learned from these tragedies extended beyond Canada and the United States. Regulatory agencies like Transport Canada and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, adopted stricter guidelines for de-icing operations and aircraft maintenance. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, also issued updated global standards for cold weather flying. These reforms included mandatory holdover time tracking for de-iced aircraft, improved maintenance protocols to ensure critical systems like auxiliary power units were fully operational, regular audits to ensure airlines maintained a safety-first culture across all operations. Perhaps the most significant long-term impact was the shift in corporate attitudes toward safety. Before these crashes, many airlines prioritized profitability and schedules over safety. The Dryden and LaGuardia investigations made it clear that such a mindset could lead to disastrous consequences. Today, a culture of safety is a cornerstone of modern aviation, with companies actively encouraging pilots and crews to report safety concerns without fear of reprisal. The crashes of Air Ontario Flight 1363 and U.S. Air Flight 405 left behind a legacy forged in tragedy. These disasters underscored the deadly consequences of inadequate de-icing procedures, operational pressures, and systemic safety failures. But more importantly, they sparked reforms that reshaped aviation safety forever. The investigations that followed revealed not only the technical flaws, but also the human and organizational errors that contributed to the crashes. Justice Moshansky's inquiry, with its 192 recommendations, became a pivotal moment for aviation safety, forcing airlines and regulators to confront their shortcomings. These recommendations led to innovations such as runway de-icing pads, longer-lasting de-icing fluids, and enhanced pilot training changes that continue to save lives today. Though the pain of those lost in these accidents will never fade, their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of learning from tragedy. Every improvement in safety protocols, from more rigorous maintenance practices to better cold weather operations training, is a tribute to the victims and survivors who endured these horrific events. Today, the aviation industry is among the safest in the world. Incidents involving wing contamination have become exceedingly rare, thanks to the hard lessons learned from Dryden and LaGuardia. While no system can ever guarantee absolute safety, the commitment to continuous improvement ensures that such tragedies are far less likely to occur. The legacies of Flight 1363 and Flight 405 remind us of the delicate balance between human judgment, technical precision, and organizational responsibility. These crashes were preventable, but their lasting impact lies in the resolve to ensure such mistakes are never repeated. As passengers, We may take for granted the safety of modern air travel, but behind every successful flight is a history of lessons learned, sometimes at great cost. It's a solemn yet hopeful reminder that even in the face of tragedy, progress is always possible.